Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Business and Utilities Subcommittee. It is Tuesday, January the 31st at 12 p.m. Mr. Clerk, can you take the roll, please?
Representatives Alexander, Burkhart, Clemens, Freeman, Hale, Holzclaw, Johnson, Marsh, Thompson, Vaughn, Vital, Zachary. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members, before we get started today, do we have any personal orders? If not, we'll go ahead and get started today. We will dispense with the introductions because Chairman Vaughn covered that pretty well this morning. Although I do see Speaker Marsh. Speaker, it is great to have you back on this committee. I served under you years ago, and so it's good to have you back on here. And so, folks, real quick, we actually do have a couple of presentations today, so I'm going to quickly go through the organizational portion of this meeting. And just to kind of get started with some policies and procedures, the committee will be at 12 p.m. here in House Hearing Room 3 on Tuesdays. Just a reminder, especially to the freshmen here or anybody that will be presenting to this committee, make sure that you get your motion and your second lined up ahead of time, so you're not that person standing in the well looking up to the committee to give you one. And we also want to make sure that if you do want a roll call vote, that you ask for that prior to the committee taking any action or any vote on your bill. Once the chairman has made a ruling, only a show of 3 committee members' hands may a roll call be asked for later, and it must be before the next bill is called up. The amendment deadline is at 10 a.m. on Mondays. That's the day before the amendment is heard in the committee. We will not take late, timely filed amendments. And I've seen it done before in a lot of subcommittees where someone will plead with the subcommittee to go ahead and pass it on to the full committee with the promise that an amendment will be filed in the full committee. This subcommittee will not do that. We will thoroughly vet the bills. We will scrutinize them, and we will get them in a good posture, Chairman Vaughn, before we move them up to full committee. And so just want to make sure people know about that. Voice amendments will not be entertained unless they are very minor and clerical in nature. Just a reminder that we will maintain decorum in this committee. There will be no running debate. Members, whether you're speaking to the sponsor of the bill or whether you're speaking to someone who's given testimony, you do need to be recognized before we speak. Debate may be limited at the chairman's discretion. And if you do have someone that you want to give testimony, they need to let us know 24 hours in advance. If they have any paper brochures, they will not be distributed. If they have something that they need sent out, they can give it to us in digital format. We will email it to the members of this committee. Just a reminder that the House made some rules this time that if a bill is calendared 3 times, once it has been calendared or heard 3 times, it will go to a special calendar that will be heard at the final meeting of this committee. A motion to adjourn is non-debatable, but it can be voted on by the committee members for approval. Members of the committee must be recognized before speaking. And one thing I have noticed over the years in various committees is sometimes people will just blurt out a question on the bill as if they're just watching something on the phone, watching a sporting event. They just blurt it out. And so in this committee, we will not recognize that. You have to be recognized if you want to call a question on the bill. So just be aware of that. And these policies are waiverable by the chairman at my discretion. And so that concludes our organizational meeting. And so members, we're going to go out of session, and we're going to invite up, we've got a couple of folks coming today, organizations to give some testimony and a presentation, and we have Mr. Ryan King and Mike Knotts with the Tennessee Electrical Co-op Association, and we also have Jeremy Elrod. And is Ryan going to be with you as well? If y'all want to come on over here and have a seat at the other table, and what we're going to do, members, is we're going to hear from the Tennessee Electrical Co-op Association. They're going to talk for probably about 15 minutes, and rather than taking questions right then, we're going to jump on over and hear from our friends at the Municipal Electric Power Association, and once they finish, then we will open it up for questions to either one. So Ryan and Mike, if you guys want to get started, and as always, turn your microphone on and make sure you state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Knotts, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Tennessee Electric Cooperative Association. I think most of you in the room, we have spent some time together in the past. In my former role as our Vice President of Government Relations, it's been a great pleasure of mine over the past 12 years to approach the General Assembly with the needs of electric cooperatives. I think most of you are very familiar with Ryan King, to my right, who has recently joined our staff to fill that role of Vice President of Government Relations. So he'll be providing the presentation today. I'll be here to assist and answer questions as needed. But it's just a wonderful pleasure to see all of you, and good luck on a great session this year.
Thank you. Ryan, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. I'm Ryan King, Tennessee Electric Cooperative Association, and it's a pleasure to be with you all. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the invite to tell a little bit about what we do, how we fit into the electric system in Tennessee, big picture, and then we'll get to some reliability issues too at the end of our presentation here today. But really just wanted to express our appreciation for the first meeting, Mr. Chairman, of your committee. So it really means a lot. So we represent 25 electric cooperatives across the state, and even a few who move into other states who are around us. I can see we've got several friends in the room who are friends to your electric cooperatives. So forgive me, you guys may know more about our electric cooperative system than I do. Your local folks. You're probably on local boards with them. You may be in civic clubs with them. You may go to church with them. So congrats, and I consider that a badge of honor if that's the case. So I want to talk really about 5 or 6 points here today, and I'll try to use some brevity as we go through, because Chairman Vaughn, I know we heard a lot of this last year through some special hearings that you held. First, kind of with the expectation that we discuss reliability at the end, I want to use several points to get there. First is structure and history. So the structure and history of cooperative systems, how we're regulated, Utility 101, illustrate the scope with some numbers. And that's really how I'm going to spend the bulk of our time. And I like to process things through numbers, so hopefully that will help us walk through kind of how our members do business in Tennessee. And then I'll do a portion here today I call from generation to outlet. So from generation at one of TVA's facilities all the way till we plug something into an outlet and consume that electricity. And then finally, like I mentioned, we'll discuss reliability. So a little bit about our history. So in the early days, as you all are probably aware, the 20s, 30s, Mr. Chairman, do you want me to pause while we get the presentation?
No, you can go ahead and go.
Okay.
The presentation will be up in a moment. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I've got it here. There it goes. Okay. It was a technical issue.
Yeah.
In the early days of electricity, the 20s and 30s, as you all can imagine, electricity deployment in our grid system was much faster in municipal areas than it was in rural areas. For obvious reasons, population density was a huge barrier to rural electricity deployment. So that's why we were created, to help overcome those barriers. And the federal government in the 30s, through, we believe, their wisdom, empowered private businesses, private cooperatives to go out and serve the rural areas all across the country through our electric cooperative system. That was done through the Rural Electrification Act when Congress authorized low-interest loans to cooperatives. And eventually the farmers, the landowners in these rural areas made up those boards, utilized that congressional authority, and now today make up our electric cooperatives. We believe, Mike and I have discussed this, we believe the most successful public-private partnership in our country's history is that partnership with the federal government and our electric co-ops that still exist today. So you all, again, I'll try not to be redundant. Many of you know that we are consumer-owned. We're not investor-owned. Our members, our consumer members, are our investors. They invest as members of their cooperative. We're a not-for-profit, so all of our retained earnings are reinvested into our business, into the infrastructure, and that culminates itself through low debt. So very low debt load, one of the smallest in the country for our cooperative members. And of course, you all know they're the fabric of many of our communities. To steal a line from Chairman Vital, they are neighbors helping neighbors. I think you've got a story you shared with me yesterday about picking up the phone and expecting to get somebody in another country or another state, which sometimes could be another country, and you got your neighbor down the road. So hopefully all of you have had that same experience with your local cooperative if you're a member. So committee chairman, if I may, I'll give you an opportunity. If you want to scan the QR code here, that will take you to our website, at which point you'll be able to kind of zoom in on your cooperative. You can get lots of information, what their offerings are. You can even get, Chairman, their local phone number. But most importantly, you can see their footprint and how that overlays with your district. So a little bit about how we're organized. So two things I'll point out before we get too deep into this presentation is that our state law allows us to organize. It allows our cooperatives, it authorizes our cooperatives to organize, and federal law regulates us. So kind of walking through two titles. We're here on bill filing deadline day, so we hear the word title a lot. Title 65 is where you'll find most of the provisions that guide us as electric cooperatives in Tennessee. It stipulates things like how our board structure is to be made up, how our dues are to be collected, how our members are to be notified about the financials of our organization, how our board members are to be democratically elected. All those things are laid out in Title 65, Chapter 25. So Title 48, you're going to find those typical things that corporations incorporate under. We also have to comply with those guidelines, unless overridden, of course, by something in Title 65. So the federal piece of that, so TVA is our primary regulator. They regulate primarily rates and some other actions that our cooperatives are authorized to do, and all of that is codified in federal law, mainly through two pieces of two bodies of law. The first one's the TVA Act of 1933, which established TVA. The second is acronym PURP, but Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act of 1978, in which several actions were finally codified. So I want to walk through this, and this may be common sense, and Mr. Elrod certainly can educate you better on the middle segment of this slide than I can, but I want to lay out specifically kind of the three different types of electric distributors in Tennessee. So the first one is us, cooperatives. I'll try to avoid being redundant, but of course we're owned jointly by all of our member customers. Membership's required. We're not for profit. And as I mentioned earlier, we're governed by that body of our members, member citizens, member owners. Public power, that's the bulk of where our citizens, not landmass, but our citizens get their power from. So that's owned by a unit of government. They're not for profit also. Mr. Elrod and Brian can get into that. And they're normally guided by an ordinance or a statute by that municipality. So last one I'll mention, and I'll spend very little time. I don't think, I know that this part of Tennessee that has the investor-owned utility, none of you serve that area. There's a small part of Northeast Tennessee that has an investor-owned utility. Of course, they're guided by their stockholders. They're governed by their stockholders, and equities are returned to their stockholders. So moving on to the kind of the by the numbers, and I hope to illustrate a lot of how we do business through some of these numbers. The left column is municipal utilities. The right column is electric cooperatives, and neither this slide. The intent of this slide isn't to point out the superiority of one or the other. It's just to point out the vast differences of the customers that we serve. So municipal customers per mile, several more customers per mile. We serve about 7.4 customers in 1 mile, and revenue. Take a look at the significant drop in revenue of line per mile of line that electric cooperatives need to operate under. So our members have to operate lean, mean. They have to think about projects. They have to think clearly about projects before undertaking them, and they have to obviously use wise strategy before doing so. Customers served, about 58% from the municipal service area and 41% customer served from electric cooperatives. You could almost take that inverse. Look at the huge disparity in landmass that our members serve. About 72% of the state is served by an electric cooperative. So huge area of landmass. And again, here's the map that illustrates that. I want to spend really more time on the bottom part of this slide. A little bit of a different take on some of these numbers. About 2.8 million Tennesseans are served by electric co-ops. That's 1 in 3 homes. So about 33% of the homes, 84 of 95 counties have an electric co-op operating within them. And of those, about 74% are an impoverished county or a poverty-stricken county. So a couple of things I'd like to point out here. If you look up in the top left of this slide, you can see our debt load per member, and I'll tell you specifically why that's the case here in a second, but significantly lower debt load per member in Tennessee than other parts of the country, and we're talking exclusively about cooperatives, cooperative utility systems. The primary driver of that is that through TVA's regulatory authority, we're required to reinvest our retained earnings back into the infrastructure. That's driven huge cost savings to our members. That's driven, obviously, huge reduction in debt load to our members. The bottom right, I won't spend too much time there, but you can see the breakdown of the meters that we service and the actual energy sales as a matter of residential, commercial, and industrial users. Obviously, residential gets the lion's share of all of those. To kind of close out the by the numbers illustration, you can see the 3 segments I've kind of divided this into. So taxes, electric cooperatives are a huge taxpayer. So our taxes are based on are predicated on an ad valorem basis through the comptroller and back to your local governments. So that $65 million straight back infused into your local government. Stack on top of that the $340 million in lieu of taxes that TVA pays on an annual basis. It's over $400 million, almost $500 million. We believe we can't. This is unfounded. This is Mike and Ryan saying this, but we believe that the utility sector, those of us sitting before you and TVA today, are the largest taxpayer. The state of in the state, not directly to the state, but the largest taxpayer. And again, most of that goes back to your local governments. So a glimpse kind of behind the curtain at our electric cooperatives financials. We do about $3.2 billion annually in revenues. Most of that, 70% of it, back to TVA in wholesale power costs. So a significant piece of that back to TVA through wholesale power costs. So you see that big number, $3.2 billion. Much of that is eaten up already. Leaves a very, very small margin for operations, capital investments, personnel, benefits, et cetera. And then on average, about 5% margins are reinvested back in to the cooperatives. We employ about 2,600 people across the state, about $175 million in payroll and benefits. And on average, our members pay about 17% less in rates than those across the country. We already touched on the last bullet point there in the middle, which is the average debt load of our members. I can't sit before you without mentioning broadband, and the reason I put this in here, Mr. Chairman, is because when meeting with most of you, this is what you think we're here to talk about. We are not, but I did want to include this. So the broadband story for cooperative started in 2017, actually long before that. But from a legal standpoint, it started in 2017 when many of you were here. Governor Haslam and then Commissioner Randy Boyd of ECD proposed the Broadband Accessibility Act, which made significant investments in rural broadband and authorized us as electric cooperatives to offer broadband services. So you can see the next two bullets have the number 1 next to them. That's the number associated with them. So I'll point out we're the only private internet service provider in the state that can't serve outside of our service territories. The service territories are frozen, although we can't serve outside of them. We're the only state in the country with those restrictions. All other states in the country have limit co-ops through territorial restrictions. So my main reason for throwing this map up is just so you can see the breadth of electric co-ops across the country. Huge service area that are served. That's those in the green. Most of that landmass covers the rural areas of the country. About 832 local cooperatives across the country, 42 million people, and 1 in 8 residents. So significant number. So I knew a number of you would ask this question, so I thought it was good to illustrate on the screen here. I've highlighted TVA service area. So what you see, the overlay there is TVA's footprint in the Mid-South. So you can see they have a significant role in the generation and transmission of power across the Southeast. I believe it's a 7-state territory. So one of my last slides as we come to a close here, I just want to kind of point out the processes that lead from going to generation until you plug something into the wall and actually receive electrical power. So I'll break it down. I'm a huge Ford fan. I love classic old Ford Broncos and new Ford Broncos. So I'll use this analogy. So an auto manufacturer manufactures the vehicle, then they ship the vehicle through freight lines, Speaker Marsh, to eventually a dealership and then to the end user. So generation, we know what generation is. Generation is where power is derived from at a TVA facility, for us exclusively a TVA facility. It could be in the form of coal, could be in the form of nuclear power, could be in the form of hydro, natural gas. It's then transmitted to our member users, or to our members, and to Mr. Elrod's members. Those two, again, exclusively through TVA, and then our members are that last piece. We're the distribution segment. We're the customer service segment. We're where the rubber meets the road. So the last thing I'll mention is the reliability piece. Number one, what is reliability? Reliability is when you go up to a light switch, you flip it on, and the lights actually come on. That's what we shoot for every single time. We get annoyed the same way you do when that doesn't happen. Fortunately, it's not that often. Mr. Chairman, if I may, we can't bring up the subject of reliability without talking about our linemen in the state who go out oftentimes in some of the worst weather, hail like we've seen today, ice like we've seen today, and put their lives at risk. So if you guys go to church with these people, you see these people on a daily basis, so just want to acknowledge them from where I sit here. Mr. Chairman, I think I saw a bill come through yesterday that would permanently establish Appreciation Day for our linemen, so thank you. I haven't talked to my boss about it, but I think we'll support that. So our most recent reliability numbers are 99.96. Speaking about electric cooperatives, so very reliability, very reliable, and that comes from really a holistic mix of all types of energy, that are generated by TVA, number of sources, natural gas to coal to hydro to nuclear. And I'm guessing many of you will have questions about Winter Storm Elliott. I'll touch briefly to the extent that we have the ability to as the distribution sector in the state. But probably more specifically about the emergency load curtailment plan, step 50, that was implemented by TVA. So it was a generation to demand issue. There were concerns that demand would simply outweigh the generation that could be generated by TVA. And there was a significant threat of our native load exceeding generation here in the valley. So it was caused by a number of factors. One of those was extreme, prolonged cold. We see all these leaves dropping off for the first time in my lifetime, some holly bushes and boxwoods. So really unprecedented, really once-in-a-lifetime type of cold conditions. And we recognize that our primary goal isn't to generate or transmit electricity. It's to distribute power to our customers. So obviously that we're very sympathetic. We owe to our customers to communicate clearly and concisely about what they can expect. So, Chairman, I hope our communication to you through that process on Christmas Eve and December 23rd and other committee members, I hope that was adequate. We tried to give you as real-time information as we could give you. So I think TVA will tell you, and I think we'll hear from TVA sometime this session. There's room for improvement. We do commend TVA for taking the necessary steps to avoid long-term grid damage. That was the end goal of the Step 50 process. And I will point out before we close that Mike, working with our leadership across the state, has communicated a number of post-event concerns to TVA, including really a 7-point outlay of specific concerns like generation, communications, and noncompliance with emergency load curtailment step 50. So I've told you about what I can on that. I'm sure there'll be specific questions, and we're happy to answer those. That's my contact information. Of course, most of you have it. Reach out anytime. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Mike. And I forgot to mention, Mike, congratulations on your promotion, and I think we all concur that you have a great hire here with Ryan. So I appreciate y'all's presentation, and if you guys will stand by, and members, if you have any questions, just write them down. We're now going to pivot over to Jeremy Elrod and Ryan Soulsby with the municipals, and just as always, be sure to make sure your microphone is on and state your name and record for your name for the record.
Good afternoon, everybody. There we are. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Soulsby. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee Municipal Electric Power Association. I've been in this role for almost 6 years now. It's my sixth legislative session. It doesn't feel like it, I guess, with that disruption in the middle with COVID, but certainly I know I've had an opportunity over the last 6 years to work with many of y'all. To my right, and we'll be covering our presentation today, is Jeremy Elrod, who's the Director of Government Relations, been with us for 10 years now, almost. So certainly we're very fortunate to have Jeremy on staff, and I will let him take it from here.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Jeremy Elrod. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Team EPA. This is my 10th legislative session, so a number of y'all have seen me for quite a while, so I appreciate the opportunity to work with y'all, and I am proud to represent the 60 municipal electric utilities across the state who do a lot of hard work day in and day out to provide services to their community through electric, broadband, water, wastewater, natural gas, and meeting their community needs day in, day out, and who I think, for good or bad, get the most attention when the lights go out or when service is interrupted. But they're out there working hard every day, and we're proud to be down here to represent them. And we are Tennessee's public power providers, and what that means essentially is that we are publicly owned as city or county utilities. that a city or county operates their utility on behalf of their community. And across the country, just some national stats where public power providers are affordable and reliable and invested in their community because they are their hometown provider, to where, to Ryan's point earlier, when you need something, you can go down the street and talk to your utility. You're not calling someone in a different state or another country. They're there in your hometown. And across the country, there are about 2,000 public utilities across the nation. About 49 million Americans get their power from a public utility, and that's 1 in 7 customers. In Tennessee, as we do in a lot of other ways, lead the nation in public power as far as the number of public power providers that we have in the country. Tennessee is a leader among them as far as how much power is sold, revenue generated, number of customers, and that's all aggregate numbers. But 12 of the top 100 public power providers are here in Tennessee. And as many of y'all know, Tennessee is unique because of TVA, the TVA Act that was passed in 1933, where they generate and transmit the power to 153 local power distributors. As Brian said, municipal county systems, rural cooperatives, all of us operate as not-for-profits. And there is a contract that exists between TVA and these local power providers, whether it's the electric cooperative or the city and county, and that's the primary legal authority for TVA to regulate power providers, where the electric system has to be operated on a not-profit basis, and utility revenues do stay with the electric system. And it also requires that all customers, no matter where they live, pay the same rates. Whether you are a business in town or at the end of the line, you pay the same electricity rates. So TVA generates and also regulates. And as Ryan went through, I'm not going to go through it again, but we all have nice charts. So this is mine for generation, transmission, and then it gets down to us as a local distributors. And this is, as we all have charts, we all have maps. This is the TVA footprint in the south here, the 7-state region. The green are the municipal and county providers in the 7-state TVA territory. And just to zoom in on Tennessee, you can see there that we have utilities that provide service in very urban areas, but also in suburban and rural areas, where we have some of our utilities serve entire counties and rural areas, particularly the west, the east, and southern middle Tennessee. And really these developed over the years, over the decades of who was best able to provide electricity in those communities. Those are the ones that expanded or were able to invest into those areas. And just some differences among the different types of utilities. And I'll agree with Ryan, it's not, comparing one good or bad. This is just some differences as far as municipal utilities and utility districts, because I know, we live in this world every day, so it's hard to, for I think the typical person to differentiate between the different ones. So here are just some different highlights as far as municipal utility districts, which I think as far as government utilities, the biggest difference there is utility districts, I guess really one, is that they are not authorized for electric service. So if it's a publicly owned electric utility, it's going to be a municipal or county utility. And where municipal county utilities, we're government owned, we have to follow open records, open meetings, and that kind of thing. We are regulated by TVA and the comptroller as government entities, and the Public Utilities Commission serves as a regulator for the private utilities, because we are regulated locally, and then also have the state and federal piece. And then just some stats on municipal electric utilities there. There are 60 across the country, serve 2.4 million homes, hold nearly $10 billion in assets, over 9,000 people that we employ across the state. And many of our utilities are multi-utilities, where they don't just provide electric. They, over nearly half of them do provide water, wastewater service, natural gas, and broadband. That's an expanding number over the years as that is becoming so important and to meet their community needs, and because of the availability of state and federal money to make those investments. And many of our city or county owned utilities do serve beyond their city or county limits, and they serve into other municipalities or other counties. And so our 60 municipal or county utilities serve over or nearly 100 other cities. And just some of the variation we have among our members, Memphis and Nashville jockey back and forth as to who is the largest by customer count as far as who is the largest utility. You see Nashville has nearly 1,000 employees. And Memphis and Nashville have over 400,000 customers. Our smallest have about 1,700 customers with 5 employees. And Memphis Light Gas and Water is the nation's largest 3-service utility of electric, water, and natural gas. And as I said, we do have a lot of urban members, but we also have a lot of suburban rural members. We're nearly a third of our utilities serve in rural areas that have less than 20 customers per mile. So each utility is unique to its community, where it's offered, where services are offered, how it's governed, employee salaries, and that kind of thing. And really, municipal and county electric utilities are structured in 3 different ways, depending somewhat on their size or the history locally. They may be just a department of the city where they answer to a city manager or directly to the mayor and the city council. It's usually smaller systems that have that structure. Most of ours have a utility board that is independent or semi-independent from the city. Those board members are appointed by the city council. Oftentimes, a city council member or a mayor sits on that board as the touch point back to the elected officials. And recently, in the past several years, many of them we have at least 10 of them now structured as energy authorities, which separates them mostly financially from the city and gives them more flexibility as far as financing and operationally and that kind of thing, where they're still tied to the city, but they do become their own separate entity there. And a utility is structured where there is a governing board that gives direction on a lot of issues, but the most important is two most important roles are hiring a utility manager and then the financial and budget oversight. So once they hire the manager, he implements their directives and runs the day-to-day of the utility with monthly or some utilities have bi-monthly meetings. And there are even certain powers still that are reserved to the city by statutes or local city charter. And we have primarily 2 statutes that govern electric utilities, the Municipal Plan Act of 1935, and then the Municipal Energy Authority Act that was passed several years ago. And as I said, there are some city charters that may put more limits on electric utility or give other guidance as far as board appointments. There may be private acts, and then, of course, the wholesale power contract that I mentioned a moment ago. And just financially, I know in the presentations last year, the comptroller pointed out that there is a difference between ratepayers and taxpayers, because a municipal utility, whether it's water, wastewater, natural gas, broadband, are separate from the city, and that each system is financially independent from the others. Where city revenue can't go to the utility, and utility revenue can't go to the city, with the exception of payment in lieu of taxes. And that is calculated on the value of the property that utility owns. But there is a unique distinction with municipal utilities, where there is a power component or a component there of the power revenue that is generated. I think it's 3 or 4%. 5% of that is calculated there. So typically, municipals provide more pilot payments to cities than electric co-op because of that distinction. And as Ryan said, if we were a taxpayer or treated as, or calculated or characterized, as a taxpayer, we would be in many communities the largest or second largest taxpayer in a community. And there are state requirements where the utility rates have to be adequate for the utility service for it to be self-supporting. And any debt that is let by the utility has to be backed by utility revenue and our revenue bonds. And any kind of rates or fees that a utility set have to have some type of cost basis. They do cost analysis, whether it's electric rates by each category or other service charges or fees. And as I mentioned a little while ago, state law and TVA restricts to where that you can't subsidize parts of your utility or send money to the city except for pilot payments. But fees and rates are set based upon cost in keeping with our not-for-profit operations. And just a couple more slides. Our local control of municipal utilities. We are the only electric provider in an area, but we do answer to our customers through city councils, county commissions, utility boards. Everything we do is open to the public, and all of this allows our communities to build a utility system or to offer services, whether it's water, wastewater, broadband, to whatever a community says that they need, and we step up according to the leadership of that community of what and where to provide those services. And so local utility boards and city councils do provide local oversight, with the state comptroller and TVA having oversight as well. And this just illustrates it a little bit more. We have a local control and oversight through setting rates, policies, hearing complaints, responding to any type of local issue. For us, the comptroller, audits, provides or conducts audits of our folks. There's bonds and the broadband feasibility studies if one of our systems wants to get into the broadband service. And then federal oversight through TVA, where they ensure compliance with TVA policies, making sure that we operate on a not-for-profit basis, approving rates that can keep with that. And then TVA several years ago started a complaint resolution process to where if something is not that many utilities have taken advantage of this, where if there's a disagreement between a customer and their local power provider, it can go to TVA. I think the last fiscal year they had, let's see, I just wrote it down, about 1,300 complaints that usually get resolved in about 3 days. And I'll just put this map here again of the utilities across the state. Excuse me. And for our members, for municipal county utilities across the state, Winter Storm Elliott was a challenge unlike anything anyone has faced. It was a difficult time when when we get power from our generator, and they say that the power that's generated and the load have to essentially meet, and it's a continuous process to keep those together. But if the amount of power load, the demand of power is higher than what is being generated, we are required through TVA, through a plan, as Ryan mentioned, the emergency load curtailment plan, to start curtailing load. And there are steps to get before, and TVA will go through the process of going to blackouts, of asking customers to, starting to ask customers to reduce power, and they have certain plans and everything for larger customers to reduce their demand and their load. And then it gets to the blackout stage, which TVA will talk about that I think was literally unprecedented in TVA's history. And so it was a challenge for us, but in trying to keep the entire system going, it was a plan and that we had to implement to keep the entire system, keep it going through the challenging weather that was going on. So happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, or committee members, but that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Ryan, for your presentation and members. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up to questions to both of them. And if you didn't pick up, or if you're new to this committee, all of our constituents, with the exception of some folks up in Kingsport, Tennessee, get their electricity either from an electrical co-op or from a municipal electrical provider. So if you're recognized, if you'll just direct your question at one of the members here, and we'll go ahead and get started. And first up, I have Representative Clemens. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. As you know, with regard to the rolling blackouts that took place, part of my district was the hardest hit in the entire state of Tennessee as far as length of outage. And it wasn't necessarily because of the rolling blackouts, but they had a substation issue at Cane Ridge, along with a series of other problems. But We held a town hall on that issue, and I thank TVA and NES and the others who came out and answered questions at that town hall. But one of the biggest pressing concerns of my constituents was the lack or inability to get a refund or rebate for the costs that they incurred as a direct result of those rolling blackouts and that substation issue. And so my question to both of you is, to both entities, I guess, is there a system or a claims filing system that y'all have, or have y'all ever discussed, whereby customers could request a refund or rebate because of direct cost as a result of negligence or gross negligence or some failure to maintain your systems? Because my constituents had to get hotel rooms or they were going to freeze in their own houses. Senior citizens, young babies. This was a real issue, and they had to incur costs that they hadn't anticipated. And so I'm just curious, y'all have a system whereby your customers can request rebates or refunds for those direct costs incurred?
Mr. Elrod, Mr. Soulsby, if you want to go first.
Sure. I'll start, Representative Clemens, and I tried to go to that town hall. I wasn't able to attend, but I watched it virtually. There is not a claims process as what you're mentioning. If the power is out, we are not. A customer, when their power is out, does not have to pay for power they don't receive. So I know you understand that process. So there is that, but we do not have a claims process. Just like any type of infrastructure, whether it's roads, utility service, telecommunications, we cannot guarantee that the lights will be on 100% of the time. All of our utilities and TVA work extremely hard on reliability to keep the lights on and invest in our systems. And so, we do not have that guarantee that power will be on all the time. And unfortunately, this was a unique situation. And I'm somewhat familiar with the situation in Antioch, and I live in South Nashville. TVA had the blackouts and the generation challenges and other things, and then there were some systems failures locally. And our utilities have outages regularly because of either weather, animals, traffic accidents. If a car hits the wrong pole, it can produce an outage. So we do not have a system currently of any kind of reimbursements like that. No, sir.
Representative Clemens, you have anything?
Well, it was directed to both. I wanted to give them both an opportunity to address it before my follow-up question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Mike, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clemens, I would agree with Mr. Elrod's assessment. From the cooperative standpoint, the primary interaction that we have with our member owners is a membership agreement. And so that is, in essence, a contract that we enter into with our members to provide electric service. And those agreements do not guarantee uninterrupted service of electricity. And so while we work very, very hard and take a lot of pride in the tremendous rate of reliability that we talked about, I think Ryan mentioned, 99.96% average reliability for our electric cooperatives. We are subject to a couple of things that we cannot control. One, we operate systems of mechanical devices that are made by human beings and operated by human beings. And so, parts, things break and parts fail. And while we work hard to maintain our systems, there is always the potential for, a mechanical malfunction. We're subject to extreme acts of God. Extreme weather. A lot of people chuckle when I tell them this. One of the primary causes of electric outages in our world today is squirrels. A squirrel can literally put 1 foot on one end of a transformer and 1 foot on the other, create an arc, and create an outage. So, like Mr. Elrod said, like the municipal utilities, electric cooperatives spend tremendous amounts of man hours and millions of dollars to maintain this electric system and maintain that reliability, because we recognize that modern society depends on the product that we provide. And we're very proud of our track record. But we can't guarantee universal, 24/7, 365 service. And so, as Mr. Elrod said, we do not have a process like you're mentioning as well.
Representative Clemens?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and so that's the concern of mine is with regard to any negligence and failure to maintain, or something that you knew or should have known that you needed to do to prevent that type of outage. So just hypothetically, if the switch box at the Cane Ridge substation hadn't been maintained or had been neglected for an extended period of time and hadn't been reinspected, that obviously led to a longer outage from our constituents. So in those situations, where the citizens are out or your customers are out for 12 hours, 24 hours when it's 3 degrees outside and they have to go get a hotel. And that's, I know you can't guarantee power. I understand how the grid works and I understand the process. But if, in situations where there may be negligence or failure to maintain or about something you knew or should have known could occur had you done your due diligence, I think just on behalf of my constituents, there's a concern there that they don't have the opportunity to recoup those costs that they shouldn't have to incur. And I'm not accusing that of happening in this instance. I'm just saying, should it ever be able to happen? So thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Thompson, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For either of you, our state borders 8 other states. Do any of your the co-ops or the municipals provide service for any of the adjoining states as well, or are you just totally in Tennessee?
If I could just clarify, when you say provide service, do you mean actually distribute electricity to? Was that your question? I can speak for cooperatives. We have a number of co-ops whose service territories do flow into bordering states. And so we have quite a few cooperative customers in Kentucky, some in a handful in Mississippi and some other places where we do border. But by and large, the overwhelming majority of our Tennessee domicile cooperative serve Tennessee customers.
Yes, sir, and it would be the same for the municipals. As you see on the map, EPB of Chattanooga goes down into Georgia, Bolivar goes down into Mississippi, and Jellicoe goes up into Kentucky.
Representative Thompson.
Yes, does that cause any particular either problems or just more opportunities as far as regulations? Do you have to deal with both states, or is there typically a gentleman's agreement between the 2 states, or how does that work?
Mr. Knotts.
I'll note I'm not an attorney. However, the place of domicile has meaning. So in those instances where we do cross boundaries, where the cooperative is domiciled is typically the home base, and the state laws of that state take precedence. So really, we don't have a lot of issues with that. Not to mention that electric grids and the physics of moving electricity from electrical energy doesn't really respect state borders or county borders or city borders for that matter. So it's really about where the infrastructure is constructed and how it's constructed. That's more pertinent to operations than political boundaries. But no, it's generally not a problem in day-to-day operations.
Mr. Elrod or Mr. Soulsby?
I would concur.
Now, I think part of it just maybe in looking at where, for instance, Jellicoe there to the north and Chattanooga, EPV of Chattanooga to the south, and just seeing where those are. I think those utilities may have been just best suited to provide service to those areas. So it looked like they may be valleys, that it would have been hard to get service there otherwise. But as far as I know, I don't know of anything negative or any problems.
Representative Thompson.
Oh, well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Vaughn, you recognized.
Good. Are we afternoon yet? Yeah, we are afternoon. I've got a question of, can we go back to Mr. Elrod's last slide? Your first point there says local control and oversight through utility board and city council sets rates, policies, hears complaints, and responds to local issues. Is there anywhere in the state that doesn't apply?
Mr. Elrod.
In a state where that does not apply?
Is there anywhere in the state that does not apply?
Not that I know of. I mean, it's up to each local utility on how they do it, though, about how they hear complaints and that kind of thing.
I can tell you that the city of Millington, the city of Lakeland, the city of Arlington, the city of Collierville, the city of Germantown has no representation on a utility board. They do not vote for the city councils of their utility provider. They have no redress whatsoever when it comes to the rates set by that entity. it's a take it or leave it proposition, and which is a concern given the fact from a number of standpoints. One being that as a result, the city that owns the municipal utility has an opportunity to influence land use and growth outside its own boundaries by its restricting of those utilities, or the amount that they charge for those utility expansions, or whether or not those the speed at which those services are delivered. That is a concern that I would be curious of where else in the state. I know those are specific instances that occurs. I'd be curious if that was the case in other places. I mean, I guess with, if you consider, let's just take Bolivar, for instance. My farm's in Hornsby. I get power from Bolivar, but I'm not I guess they're an energy authority now, though, so I do have representation and redress with regards to that. But other than that, I'd be curious where else in the state that circumstance exists.
Mr. Elrod?
And you and I have talked about this a number of times, so.
And we'll continue to talk about it, Mr. Elrod.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. And you're here to represent your constituents, so I appreciate it. There are challenges, and I'm sure in other areas of, people that feel like that their utility may not respond to them because of that if, we have some of our utilities that are owned by a city that may serve out into a county. I think that, is your example or your area. And there may be challenges there, but I think it is, the goal, at least for rate setting, everyone pays the same rates. And when there are, those local instances, where folks need to try to get together and hopefully work it out, and try to provide, the utility service that every, customer deserves and that we're supposed to provide.
Chairman Vaughn?
Well, I understand through your customer service agreement, not any statutory regulatory authority that TVA possesses, but through the operation of y'all's power supply contracts, that there is no discrimination with rates across the spectrum. Does that no discrimination policy, is it in that agreement to where system expansion costs are the same, whether or not I expand in one section of the county versus the other?
Mr. Elrod?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I haven't read one, and lately Brian may know of something else. He's run a utility before.
Yeah, I would say my understanding is that there is no discrimination there. I think the things that you look at is, the distance to serve that, the load that you're picking up, and those would be the factors, and how far you're having to come from to pick that up, whether or not you're having to go further back to pick up three-phase power, if it's in an area with single phase. Those are other factors that come into play. Again, I can't speak to any specific situation, but I understand your question.
Chairman Vaughn?
Yes, and understand the system expansion itself will determine what the variable of the cost is. I understand that. But if there's no section of the power contract that requires there to be no discrimination based upon geography, or I guess through, you could say, political subdivision, any of that, then how would you know if someone was doing that?
Mr. Soulsby?
Yes, sir. I would say that, looking at your local utility, you would need to ask them for a copy of their policy regarding extensions. Generally speaking, my understanding would be that if it costs you this much per foot of such said size wire, that would be the same whether or not that was inside the city or a more rural county area. Of course, the thing is, the size of wire costs the same per foot. If it cost you 1,000 foot to pick up that customer versus 100 foot to pick up that customer, the cost from a material perspective would be tenfold.
Chairman Vaughn?
I understand that. That's common sense, common logic. But if there's nothing required, then that might be something that this body might want to consider, that if it's not in, and remember for the new members here, these gentlemen refer to TVA as their regulator. TVA is their rate regulator, but if they were to leave TVA, no one would be regulating our municipal power suppliers. They are strictly governed by their power supply contract with TVA. But, Mr. Chairman, I have tons of questions, tons of thoughts. I even wouldn't mind getting into broadband, but we have so many other committee members here, I'm sure, that want to ask these fellows questions. I'll yield to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, do we have any other questions? If not, men, I appreciate y'all coming to speak today. And committee, we should be hearing from TVA. If not next week, we will be hearing from them soon. And I know a lot of you have expressed interest in asking them some questions. So I just want to thank Tennessee Electric Co-op Association and the Tennessee Municipal Electric Power Association for coming today. And you guys might want to hang around. There may be some committee members that have questions after our session. All right, members, we are going back into session, and I just realized when we were giving the presentations that I actually failed to introduce a lot of our committee members. So if you'll indulge me for just a second, we actually do have two attorneys, Lovin Middleton Dunn and Doug Garrett. Both of them have been excused today because they're trying to prepare all the bills that are being filed today for today's deadline. We have Mr. Owen Rosenberg, who's our research analyst, right here to my right. Joey Barnett is my assistant and will be functioning as the clerk in this committee. And we also have Rachel Bennett back there, who is also a clerk. And then Mr. Wayne Hawkins is the sergeant at arms. And so, members, this concludes our business today. Do I have a motion to adjourn? This meeting is adjourned.